Life divine is all about human evolution and its culmination in a supramental status of consciousness. This is through psychic, spiritual, and supramental transformation. There is an integral emergence into an integral reality. All is involved in the beginning, and everything evolves out of this involution. There is a constant movement between two involutions, that is matter and spirit. Sri Aurobindo says, in a sense, it may be said that there is an evolution from matter upwards towards spirit, and there is an evolution from spirit downward towards matter. That means matter is involved in spirit, spirit is involved in matter. Spirit can appear as matter, matter can be resolved into energy, and it can be again transformed into spirit. What we regard the human being as a turning point in the evolution. There are two transitions we have talked about. That is, one is the involutionary, and the other is the evolutionary transition, ascent and descent transitions. When we see the higher gradations of consciousness, which have been glimpsed by some of the super minds, then we feel an impossibility to reach out to that heightened status. It is because the Sachidananda, the existence, consciousness, bliss is quite inconceivable by ordinary consciousness today, where human being is struggling and striving to have those kind of things to grasp, those kind of concepts to grasp in these material involutions. And it is said that soul is experiencing here the physical, vital and mental existence and consciousness. We have an aspiration, what we have been gifted by the nature in us, and for which there is a drive. That biggest aspiration in us is to be actually achieved. That is the impulse in human being that has been nurtured by nature, and impulse towards perfection is the greatest drive in the human being towards its movement upward. And this human aspiration of the heightened status of immortality, freedom, God and light, to be one day brought to this universe, that is the dream of this philosophy, culmination of this philosophy, which is the distinguishable future, which is the distinction of this philosophy, which we will discuss in the next chapters or in the next sessions. I have made it into three parts. The first part already I have briefed it. But one thing I must tell, when I actually go from one part to the other part, then we have to integrate this part with the other parts, because there is a requirement of an integration, because we have to have all these suppositions, because only on suppositions we can conceptualize these things, because these are higher concepts. These are actually conceptualized by the higher minds. These spiritually conceptualized concepts cannot be conceptualized so easily by these ordinary human minds. That's why we must have some suppositions in this beginning, and that's why we have these ascending and descending passages. And when we think about this ascending passage, where we are now moving upwards, so the human being is in this upward movement towards their heightened status, cannot actually go beyond the mind status, because we are limited in our consciousness. The human being is limited in his consciousness by mind, and it is the mental limits of this existence and consciousness. We have to actually go beyond, and for that we have to have some suppositions in the first place, because when we actually, as we are if we go for solving math, what we do, we take x as a supposition, then we get the answer. In the similar fashion, we have to also carry out these operations or exercises in this way. What you do here, we have a descending passage. In this descending passage, we have actually, this is a, Sri Aurobindo says this is a logical imperative, where this is a practical necessity. Ascending is a practical necessity. We are going up. But we have to have the supposition, because we have to conceptualize what will actually be the afterwards journey. In the descending passages, we have all these higher gradations, because he says there are many gradations we have to pass through in our evolutionary journey. And now I am, before going to the second part of my explanations, I just want to say one thing. In the first part also, we should not stick to the first part, because I have only talked about, or we have only discussed about this movement. But in the beginning, there was no movement. The original concentrated unity, from where everything proceeded, there is the concept of, this is the concept of original concentrated unity, the original self-concentration. We can say pure Unitarian consciousness, unknowable, which cannot be conceivable by ordinary human mind. That's why it cannot be explained. That's why it is ineffable. From there, we have proceeded to our movement, where the forms and forces are in the movement, forms of forces are in the movement. In this original concentration, or where the original concentrated unity, where Sachidananda is in its timeless and spaceless concentration, which is actually immutable and immobile, there, from there, we have to have some new concepts, new terms to be familiarized with when we go to the movement. Consciousness force, because consciousness as a force has created this movement. Its very nature is here regarded as a force, and that's why we have to familiar with one new word which actually given to us by Sri Aurobindo, that is supermind. This supermind, when we talk about supermind, we have to have the concept of knowledge will and real idea. We have to have these two terms also as well with you, because we are in the movement. And this consciousness force in the form of knowledge will by real idea is instrumental in creation of this world existence. Then when we actually go to the extension or movement, then in the first place or in the first voyage, from this primal voyage, when we go to the movement to the extension, then we will have also no kind of, no sign of any creation, because there is a self-extension, infinite and indivisible. That is called infinite indivisible's original self-extension. There is no independent center of existence. There is no independent center of existence. There is no concentration of consciousness. That's why there is no creation. There is no center and circumference. That's why there is no creation. That is called the comprehending consciousness and of the super mind, because supermind also is broadly divided into two knowledge or two consciousness. In the first place, there is a comprehensive knowledge. It's we cannot just conceptualize, but we can think there is an extension, infinite and indivisible. If there is no center, then there is no creation. And when we come to the part of the creation, then we see in the first place there is a apprehending or projecting knowledge. That means there is a concentration of, there is a unequal concentration of consciousness, exclusive concentration of consciousness. We have to hold all the powers and aspects only to leave one selective power and aspect to be manifested there. And in this process, the there is a beginning of individualization or an objective cognition. There is a beginning of objective cognition, or there is a beginning of process of individualization. From there, actually, we have the other things. Just I am going to elaborate how these infinite multiple centers are to be realized there, because when we see the fast, there is a simultaneous action of aggregation and division. But fast, it is because we have to conceptualize these things. That's why fast I have to actually see the part of the division in the how the division first comes into a place. Then there is a creation. Division, when it starts, there are infinite multiple centers, and each center can claim, because it is infinite extension, there is infinite individual infinite above, then each center can claim that it is the center itself. There is how the this is all I am talking about, the descending passage, the descent. If we actually conceptualize the descent, then we can think about and integrate how we are ascending. Actually, in the first place, when I now talk about this thing, there is a self-extension and infinite individual, and then the apprehending consciousness of infinite, making infinite multiple centers. Knowledge is centered, how there are infinite. No, actually, in this second occasion also, there is no real division, but there is a subordinate process of delimitation with all knowledge. This subordinate process of delimitation is a requirement for the creation, and this is actually all containing, all pervading, and all inviting. Three words I am telling, because actually what happens in this case, all is contained, many in one and one in many concept actually to be recognized here. If you think about these things, this whole concept of consciousness is content. It is upheld and it is not left to be in the division, but there is a process of inhabitation. That means all containing, all pervading, and all inhabiting. In this process, we can have the process of individualization. We can have the concept of pragyana, where the many purus, concept of many purus of Sankhya. We can have here that how there are many soul forms, essence is same. It is not like that where in the comprehending consciousness, where comprehensive knowledge is the basis of the existence. All is developing in unity as one in the comprehending consciousness. It is not like that. It has been descended now. So here what happens? In this status of consciousness, what we discuss now, there are many soul forms, and in this individualization, when the individualized soul identifies with its form, rigidly fixed forms, then there is a possibility of egoistic existence. And this is the problem, from where actually there is a lapse. And Aurobindo uses the word inconscience. That means how this lapse or the ignorance has been penetrated into status of consciousness, which are of very higher gradations. but it is because of this process of delimitation in the latter stage, it has been into the lapse. But one thing we must recognize here, in this process, supermind uses mind. This apprehending consciousness, when we talk about, there is a use of the mind by supermind for all these creations. When I talk about the mind in the descending passage, and when we actually see our mind in this ascending passage, there is a big difference. That is actually freely limiting mind, which is the creator. And here is a mind which is a weak mind. We are the secondary creators, we are only imagining and we are having all these mental representations, mental constructions, we are not really creating anything. And that's why this is a helplessly limited mind. This word is used by Sri Aurobindo in Life Divine. Helplessly limited mind, and there is a freely limiting mind. And in the lapse, it is because now it is already divided and we are emerging from this involution. That's why what we see, this is a mind, but quality of dividing is there. It is divided, and this quality, with this quality we are only making these forms representations, and we actually remain in the rigidly fixed forms, actually to subject to the characteristic activity of our mind. We have to have these rigidly fixed forms, and this is the status of this ascending. We have to actually think and integrate simultaneously, or in the latter state when we actually learn more about these things. But when I talk about this mind, the powerful mind, which is actually the real creator on this descending passage, and supermind uses mind, there actually I will hint one chapter there, matter. The last 2-3 pages, if one reads, one can get. There is another hiatus, there is another connect there between mind and supermind. That is in this passage we will read, that is overmind. And there is also said as a superconscient cosmic mind. This mind is responsible for the creation, and how it is described, I will actually give a better idea about these things in my next course of these interactions. But now just I want to tell why I hinted the chapter matter. Because if you see this matter, we see there is really in the division, we find there is a requirement of division to be taken to its extreme. That means there is a fragmentation to its extreme. In very, very small, infinitesimal particles, we can have the existence possible. How it is, that is explained in the chapter Matter of Life Divine. It is because actually there is an explanation about the creation. Now we have come to know about this Higgs boson, God's particles. If we read that chapter, we can get actually the hints about these things. Sri Aurobindo says it much before that what we are coming across today in the science. You see, he talks about the anatomic extension. He also talks about the requirement of the division to be taken to its extreme. That means there is a requirement of fragmentation to its extreme. And what we get now, the elementary particle, when interacts with that force field, then it gains mass. And the similar way, he has also given the concept of gaining this mass, how the perception of the higher status of consciousness is converted into energy, and how inhabiting in these particles, these fragmentations, the supraconscient cosmic mind actually enables this spiritually conceptualized fragment to be carried with energy. These all things are actually explained there. We can have these things there. And the second, when I talk about the division, then we have to have also, I have told in the beginning, that simultaneous action of aggregation, because division and aggregation are both required for the creation. Because when we have the small particles, actually a small particle does not have independent existence. It has to be aggregated and to come into form. And what are the forms? Because there is infinite potential multiplicity there in the beginning. And when we give a form, then we have to have some idea. And that idea I have already introduced, real idea. By real idea, actually, we get these whole creations. This is called the self-determinative knowledge in the beginning. The seed knows the tree. And this is also explained in 3 different chapters. If we look to the chapter Divine Maya, the differentiating power of Brahman, because all these movements are the one rhythm of Brahman, and this differentiating power of Brahma is used for the creation. And we see there is another chapter I am hinting here, that is the Supreme Truth Consciousness, where we can also have the creative knowledge of truth consciousness, because there is a requirement of self-ordering knowledge. Otherwise, everything will be in a chaos. There will be only confused, teeming uncertainty, where everything may be lapsed again and again and again, and creation will be again a difficult process, more difficult process, an impossibility. But it is because of this secret, this selective faculty of knowledge of divine Maya, or creative consciousness of truth consciousness, or by this real idea, who is the self-determinative knowledge of all the creations. We have been to here to have the whole concepts. Now, I am again repeating this thing. I am opening this thing for future interactions, because this is just the beginning one. I have to clarify one by one chapter also. But here I am again repeating this thing. What I have told about the original concentrated unity, which is the pure Unitarian consciousness. We can say that is the supracosmic reality behind all this existence. This is the self-existent reality. I have told, where there is no movement, there is no creation. And in the second, in the movement section also, when I come to the supermind's original self-extension, or the primary self-extension, there is also no creation, because there is no independent center of existence. That's why there is no creation. There is only an infinite, indivisible extension. And this is regarded as the comprehending consciousness. Comprehensive vastness is the basis of this comprehending knowledge. Then comes the process of individualization, or the objective cognition, what we regard as the apprehending consciousness, apprehending, confronting and presenting knowledge here, where there are simultaneous actions of 3 things, but actually we cannot integrate in the first place. That's why we have to first have this process of division. And we have the use of mind here, how supermind is used mind. There is a conjugate cosmic mind here. And the fragmentation, I have actually shared about this matter, chapter matter, the last 2 chapters, the concept of Higgs boson, or what is What is about this concept of anatomic extension is also expounded there. And the action of supercontingent cosmic mind in the creation. I am actually talking about distinction of Sri Aurobindo. What is the distinguishable feature of Sri Aurobindo? We all, from our philosophies, especially Hindu philosophies, talk about the going back to the source where we have proceeded from. Then Aurobindo says, no, light is to be brought to this universe, in this body, in this existence, consciousness and bliss. We have to have all these lights here only, body, mind and life. In this creation we can have these lights. This is the actually distinguishable feature where he says कि Buddha stops somewhere talking about the Nibbana or killing all these mental representations and mental constructions. And Buddha does not believe in the self and all that. The Hindu philosophies talk about the self or the silent self where is the source and everybody in the end, in the cycle goes there. But he tells there is a light possible here. He talks about the supramental consciousness. Supramental word itself is significant, and he uses the word supermind and supramental. It is because he wants to see that minds exceeding to this higher status of consciousness or the heightened status of consciousness, where mind, body and life can enjoy the heightened status of consciousness, where in the next, the first 1 to 28 chapter is the book 1, and the next chapter in the, I will actually go one by one, this gnostic being and all these heightened status of consciousness in the gradations. He talks about the possibility of that light on this planet. That he talks about. His distinction from the beginning. When actually we started, we regard death, hunger and incapacity is the first word, and we are actually evolving towards immortality, satisfied light and omnipotence. And death, hunger and incapacity is also the Darwinian concept. But he tells, no, it is the division, force-driven subconscious will, and the importance of an inert subjection to the mechanical forces are the first words. Division, why he has taken the division? Because here we have already explained, because there is a requirement of a division for the creation, and division actually is simultaneously with an aggregation. Second term or middle terms, he tells death, mutual devouring or hunger and conscious desire, because there is a limited capacity and we have to aspire for the higher capacity. And actually when we conclude these things, when I am going to conclude these things, I want to only tell this. This is a never-ending book. The more you read, the more you can learn from Life Divine. And if you want to get more clarification, you know that we have to reach out to the people there in Pondicherry and all these people, those who are talking in YouTube. But I feel I can also interact. I have a feeling that I have grasped to some extent, and I can interact, and I am giving you my email address. Anybody wants to contact me can contact me, and we can have a good interaction on Life Divine and other books as well. And we have to integrate these things, and this is an integral yoga. We have to integrate, we have to take up these lower status of consciousness or gradations into the higher status of consciousness. As he says, we have already been into the lapse, the consciousness has been into this inconscience. The bliss is to the utter insensibility, and the existence into the abysm of that darkened material or inconscience. But we are hopeful. There is an impulse in us. There is an inalienable impulse towards self-realization. We can have these things, and we are progressing with all progressive mental illumination. And I am sure we can be benefited by this kind of interactions with each other. And thank you very much.